and we get going, we'll have enough people. The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 2E and House Rule 11-2H4, the Chair announces that he may postpone roll call votes. Today we meet to consider H.R. 5630, the Solar Fuels Innovation Act, H.R. 5640, the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, and H.R. 5636, the National Institute of Standards and Technology Campus Security Act. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5638, the Solar Fuels Innovation Act, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5638, a bill to provide for the establishment at the Department of Energy of a solar fuels basic research initiative.
Without objection, H.R. 5638 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. And I'll recognize myself and then the ranking member for opening statements. The first bill before us this afternoon, H.R. 5638, the Solar Fuels Innovation Act, gives statutory authority and direction to the Department of Energy's groundbreaking solar fuels research program. I thank our Energy Subcommittee Vice Chairman, Steve Knight, for introducing this legislation, which is the product of the subcommittee's hearings, oversight, and outreach. Research to create fuels from the sun, also known as artificial photosynthesis and photosynthesis replication, relies heavily on the study of chemistry and materials science. By prioritizing these areas of fundamental science, researchers can develop systems that can take energy from sunlight and create a range of chemical fuels. This basic research could provide the scientific and technical underpinnings for the private sector to develop solar fuel systems that eliminate the problems of the intermittency of solar energy and make it a reliable power source for chemical fuels production. H.R. 5638 authorizes the Secretary of Energy to carry out a targeted basic research initiative on photochemistry, electrochemistry, biochemistry, and the material science necessary to develop complex systems to convert sunlight into usable and storable fuels. This legislation also provides the necessary statutory direction and accountability for translational research in solar fuels. H.R. 5638 focuses the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy on early-stage research that will not be undertaken by the private sector. DOE must focus on this kind of groundbreaking R&D while the private sector finds ways to deploy innovative technology in the energy market. By directing DOE to conduct this research using existing funds in the Office of Science and EERE, the legislation also ensures the responsible use of limited tax dollars for basic research. So I encourage my colleagues to support this legislation and now recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, the ranking member of the committee, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. I want to thank you for holding this markup today. I welcome the opportunity to do everything we can to advance research in solar fuels. Solar fuel technologies aim to produce fuels like hydrogen and hydrocarbons from a combination of sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and do this far more efficiently than nature's photosynthetic process. If we can figure a way to do this and make it cost competitive, solar fuels have the potential to make a major contribution to reducing our dependence on oil and other fossil fuels. However, I wish we could have taken a little more time to make sure we're doing this the right way before going straight to a full committee markup. My staff only saw early draft language of this bill a few weeks ago, and on Tuesday, the Department of Energy raised significant concerns with some of the bill language. I do not believe that the issues the department has raised are insurmountable, and perhaps some of the amendments offered today will help to address them. But I still believe that these issues could have been avoided if the committee had proceeded with regular order on this bill. Having said that, I do support the intent of the bill, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We will now go to amendments, and Mr. Grayson will be here shortly to offer his amendment, and until he arrives, we'll go to the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, and he is recognized to offer an amendment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do have an amendment at the desk.
And the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5638, offered by Mr. Takano of California, amendment number 071.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman from California is recognized to explain his amendment.
In the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I'm speaking about both the amendment I'm offering to the Solar Fuels Innovation Act and the one I will offer to the Energy Storage Innovation Act, as they are related to each other. Last month, this committee held what I thought was a very worthwhile hearing that helped illuminate the importance of strengthening our support for research in both solar fuels and electricity storage. This is clearly the aim of the two energy bills we're considering today, and I appreciate the majority is attempting to advance technologies that could go a long way to improving our energy security and, yes, to addressing the serious threat of climate change. However, I am concerned about what may be some of the unintended consequences of the language in these bills, and the Department of Energy echoed these concerns to majority and minority committee staff this week. DOE noted that labeling research as either basic or applied in legislation could be problematic, given that the distinction can be unclear and subjective, and the activities described in these bills can easily be considered applied research given current guidance by the Office of Management and Budget. So, language attempting to restrict the initiatives authorized in these bills to basic research activities could create an inherent conflict in their implementation. I would note that at that hearing last month, I actually asked the witnesses about whether it is unrealistic to assert and attempt to build policy around a separation between basic and applied research. All of the witnesses agreed that such a division is non-existent, and policymakers should not try to divide these two categories of research or pit them against one another. Dr. Nathan Lewis said, quote, "To the extent that the use-inspired fundamental research has an outlet into practical implementation, there should be no boundary," end quote. Mr. Daniel Holloman agreed and said, quote, "The questions that we need to answer are well defined by the applied side, and then we can approach them for a fundamental perspective. There is not really a clear line between basic and applied," end quote. Dr. Daniel Sherson said, quote, "10% of the cost of an actual battery goes into materials and 90% into manufacturing. So you know we have to be able to bridge the gap between what we regard as fundamental research and applied research. I'm afraid companies may not want to take the risk," end quote. And Dr. Colin Broholm noted the example of the legendary Bell Labs, a model for research that the private sector no longer supports, saying, quote, "Those who are working in the discovery realm need to have the ability to view some of the challenges that exist in the real world as well, so this artificial barrier is in fact very unfortunate," end quote. Lastly, I would note that one of the letters of support that we received today from a company called Opus 12, based in Berkeley, California, highlighted significant concerns with this bill's limitation to basic research activities. The letter concludes by stating that, quote, "The Solar Fuels Innovation Act can be more than just a way to sponsor basic research. It can be a way for America to take the first steps toward a new frontier of commercially available solar fuels," end quote. I think that's the whole point of this bill. So given the expert testimony we received on this issue just a few weeks ago, as well as the constructive guidance that the department and leading innovators provided to us this week on these bills, I hope we all can agree that such labels aren't helpful and can be harmful. Rather, our goal is to guide and support energy research that the private sector is unlikely or unwilling to pursue at a sufficient pace to meet the national economic, environmental, and energy security needs. Any arbitrary barrier to that goal, even if it's well-intentioned, is a step in the wrong direction. And Mr. Chairman, I would offer I don't know if I need to offer this letter into the record or not, but if I do, I will.
Without objection, that'll be made a part of the record.
Thank you.
No problem.
And I yield back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Takano, and I'll recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. Very briefly, the amendment would delete all references to basic research in the legislation. This legislation itself establishes a basic research initiative to study the fundamental science behind the process of creating fuels from sunlight. Artificial photosynthesis is a groundbreaking concept. It will require long-term research in the physical sciences to understand and develop solar fuel systems. You don't need to be a scientist to recognize that discovery science and chemistry and advanced materials is by nature basic research. And while this administration remains focused on deploying today's technology, we have a responsibility in Congress to ensure that we focus on the future. By investing limited federal resources in basic research, we can lay the foundation for tomorrow's technology breakthroughs. Basic research is a priority of the federal government. This legislation also provides authority for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy to conduct translational research and development that will bridge the gap between basic research and innovators in the private sector. But without the basic research that is the primary focus of this initiative, there will be no new fundamental science discoveries to build upon for that research. This legislation has received a number of support letters from research universities that specifically recognize the importance of the focus on basic research in this initiative. The Solar Fuels Innovation Act provides the necessary guidance and statutory direction to advance this important field of basic research. The gentleman's amendment would undermine the priorities of this bill, and for that reason and others, I encourage members of the committee to oppose the amendment. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson, is recognized on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman from California for this amendment. I didn't strike the last word. I meant to.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5
Okay.
minutes.
The gentleman's amendment is very straightforward. As we heard from every single witness at a hearing this committee held on this topic last month, as well as from the Department of Energy, there is no clear boundary that divides basic and applied research. It is not realistic and certainly goes against our general understanding of scientific discovery and innovation to try to confine the activities of our top researchers in this way. OMB's definition of the difference between the two actually depends on what these researchers had in mind when they were making their discoveries. I don't see how we can or should try to legislate this. Further, there's absolutely nothing wrong with federal support for so-called applied research as long as due diligence has been taken to verify these activities are not already sufficiently supported by the private sector to meet national goals. As the lead Democratic co-sponsor of the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have no issue with supporting what would be typically be called applied research and development of advanced nuclear technologies. So I don't see why we can't be similarly supported here. I thank the gentleman for his amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, the question is on the amendment offered by Mr. Takano. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the amendment is not agreed to. And we will now go to the next amendment. Excuse me, before we go to the next amendment, I'd like to recognize the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from California, Mr. Knight, who is the vice chairman of the Energy Subcommittee, and he is recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and excuse my lateness. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this important legislation. H.R. 5638, the Solar Fuels Innovation Act, will direct the Department of Energy to establish a basic research initiative in solar fuels. The solar fuel process, also known as artificial photosynthesis, harnesses energy from sunlight to create a range of chemical fuels. Basic research in artificial photosynthesis and related research could lead to a solar fuel system that consolidates solar power and energy storage into a cohesive process. This would be a game changer for the United States. Researchers up and down the coast of California are undertaking this research, from universities in Southern California to Lawrence Berkeley Lab in the Bay Area. At this time, I would like to introduce letters from researchers at the University of California, Irvine, and California Institute of Technology into the record.
Without objection, they'll be made a part of the record.
The research authorized in this legislation could solve this key scientific challenge and open the door for American entrepreneurs to develop the next generation of solar technology. The Solar Fuels Innovation Act will also enable universities and the DOE labs to train the next generation of scientists through a multidisciplinary approach, bringing together students in chemistry, physics, and material science. This legislation provides a framework for more coordination between basic research and early-stage translational research in solar fuels. Through this initiative, the transformative discoveries in energy science achieved at our universities and national labs will give the private sector the tools they need to develop the next breakthrough in solar energy technology. This legislation is also fiscally responsible. By directing DOE to conduct this research using existing funds in the Office of Science and EERE, this legislation ensures the responsible use of limited tax dollars for the kind of research only the federal government has the tools to undertake. Today, we hear a lot of enthusiasm for solar power, but far too often we focus on today's technology, not the fundamentally new approach to renewable energy that is possible with this early-stage research. DOE must focus on this kind of groundbreaking R&D that can lead to disruptive technology. Solar fuels could someday change the way we think about solar power. I encourage my colleagues to support this legislation. I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Knight, both for your statement and for introducing the legislation. And in addition to the two letters that Mr. Knight put into the record, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to include 11 letters of support for the two energy bills. These letters come from research universities, including the University of Texas at Austin, Yale University, University of North Carolina, Penn State University, University of Oregon, Northwestern University, Michigan State University, Columbia University, Arizona State University, Case Western Reserve University, and Stony Brook University as well. I assume that's in New York, Mr. Tonko. All right, let's see. We will now go to the next amendment that is to be offered by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Grayson, and he is recognized for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire which of the two amendments?
This would be Grayson Amendment number 1.
Solar fuels.
On the first bill on the solar fuels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment at the desk will authorize the Secretary of Energy to carry out activities under this initiative through the Energy Innovation Hubs.
And
I'm sorry, we need to read it first.
Yeah, the
don't
clerk
we?
will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5638, the Solar Fuels Innovation Act, offered by Mr. Grayson of Florida, amendment number 164.
And without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. The amendment at the desk will authorize the Secretary of Energy to carry out activities under this initiative through the Energy Innovation Hubs. 4 hubs exist, and one is specifically working on converting fuels from sunlight. If the Department of Energy has a hub specifically working on this initiative, it makes sense to include it as an authorized organization to work on this program. I want to thank the Chairman and his staff for working with us on this amendment. I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson, and I'd like to recommend to my colleagues that we accept the amendment. It is as Mr. Grayson described it, and I think it is a good amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. We will now there are no further amendments reporting quorum.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Oh, you have another amendment. The gentleman is recognized for purposes of offering another amendment.
I offer Grayson number 163.
We're considering only the first bill, not the second bill yet.
I apologize.
We'll be getting to that momentarily. If there are no further amendments on H.R. 5638, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 5638, the Solar Fuels Innovation Act, to the House as amended, with the recommendation that it be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5638 to the House as amended. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and H.R. 5638 is ordered reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table, and H.R. 5638 is ordered reported to the House. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5640, the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5640, a bill to provide for the establishment at the Department of Energy of an electricity storage basic research initiative.
Without objection, H.R. 5640 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and I'll recognize myself and the ranking member for opening statements. H.R. 5640, the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, provides important statutory authority and direction for the Department of Energy's groundbreaking basic research in electricity storage. Breakthroughs in electricity storage are one of the next frontiers in our energy future. Innovations leading to advanced next-generation batteries could help bring affordable electric and renewable energy to the market without costly subsidies or mandates. By investing in the basic scientific research that will lead to advanced battery technology, we can enable utilities to store and deliver power produced elsewhere on demand. This will allow us to take advantage of energy from all our diverse natural resources. As the nation's lead federal agency for basic research in the physical sciences, the Department of Energy's Office of Science is the ideal leader for this fundamental scientific research. H.R. 5640 authorizes the Secretary of Energy to carry out a basic research initiative in the chemical and material science necessary for advanced electricity storage systems, including multivalent systems, mesoscale electrochemistry, and high-performance computational modeling and simulation. This legislation also provides the necessary statutory direction and accountability for translational research in electricity storage. H.R. 5640 focuses the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy on early-stage research that will not be undertaken by the private sector. H.R. 5640 also clearly outlines the federal government's role in research and development by prohibiting the use of these program funds for the commercial application of energy technology. The transformative breakthroughs in energy science achieved by researchers at our national labs will enable and empower the private sector to develop innovative energy technologies. The private sector is best suited to bring new technology to the energy market. By directing DOE to conduct this research using existing funds in the Office of Science and EERE, this legislation ensures the responsible use of limited tax dollars for basic research. Basic scientific research, like the work authorized in the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, requires a long-term commitment. While this groundbreaking science can eventually support the development of new advanced energy technologies by the private sector, Congress must ensure limited federal dollars are spent wisely and efficiently. Federal research and development can build the foundation for the next major scientific breakthrough. As we shape the future of the Department of Energy, we must prioritize basic energy science and research that only the federal government has the resources and mission to pursue. I urge my colleagues to support the legislation. I'll yield back and recognize the gentlewoman from Texas, the ranking member, Ms. Johnson, for her statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I strongly support efforts to advance research in electricity storage. Advanced battery technologies can improve the stability of our electric grid and greatly enhance our ability to efficiently use the wide range of clean energy resources that our country is lucky enough to have at our disposal. Much like the research that is the focus of Solar Fuels Innovation Act, this research could go a long ways in addressing the critical issue of climate change. And so I'm generally in support of this effort. However, as with the Solar Fuels Bill, we have skipped regular order in the consideration of this bill, and I think that the bill language has suffered as a result. As DOE has pointed out, the repeated use of the term basic research in this bill is problematic. as there is a clear application in mind for this research, electricity storage. Mr. Takano has an amendment to address this, and I think its adoption would clearly improve the bill. Nonetheless, I appreciate the chairman's effort to focus attention on this important issue, and I want to thank him for introducing the legislation, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And we will now proceed with amendments in the order listed on the roster. And the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Grayson, is recognized first.
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5640, the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, offered by Mr. Grayson of Florida, amendment number 163.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you. This amendment does for batteries what the previous amendment did for sunlight. Again, I thank the chair and his staff for cooperation on this amendment, and I appreciate your support. I yield back.
I'd like to encourage members of the committee to support the amendment as well. It's self-explanatory, and I think a good one. Thank the gentleman for offering it. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. We will go next to an amendment to be offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, and he is recognized for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the
The
desk.
clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5640, the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, offered by Mr. Takano of California, amendment number 072.
And without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I already made my remarks on this amendment in my previous statement, and I let my words stand.
I thank the gentleman for his brief comments, in which case my comments will be equally as brief, although I do oppose the amendment. And the gentlewoman from Texas, the ranking member, is recognized for her very brief comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to strike the last word.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I really want to thank the gentleman from California for this amendment. The gentleman's amendment is similar to his amendment to the previous bill, and I'd like to reiterate that every single witness at a hearing this committee held on this topic just last month testified that there is no clear boundary between basic and applied research. To try and artificially create that boundary in this bill is a bad idea. If we weren't going to listen to the experts when we craft our bills, I'm really not sure what we're doing here. I thank the gentleman for his amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the Takano amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. If there are no further amendments, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 5640, the Electricity Storage Innovation Act, to the House as amended with the recommendation that it be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5640 to the House as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and H.R. 5640 is reported favorably. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. H.R. 5640 is ordered reported to the House. I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. We will now go to our third and last bill to be marked up today, and that is H.R. 5636, the National Institute of Standards and Technology Campus Security Act, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5636, a bill to increase the effectiveness of and accountability for maintaining the physical security of NIST facilities and the safety of the NIST workforce.
Without objection, H.R. 5636 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and I'll recognize myself and the ranking member for opening statements. This final bill today increases accountability for maintaining the security of facilities at the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the safety of the NIST workforce. I want to thank Chairman Loudermilk for his significant oversight work on this issue and for introducing the result of that, H.R. 5636. Last July, a senior officer with the NIST Police Services Group attempted to manufacture meth at one of the laboratories located at NIST Gaithersburg, Maryland campus. The officer, who was previously the acting chief of police at the campus, caused an explosion that burned his face and arm and blew out the lab windows. It is shocking that a federal agency didn't know that a meth lab was being run on its property, right under its nose, and without the explosion, it might never have been discovered. The meth lab explosion and subsequent investigation have raised serious concerns about the safety and security of the entire NIST campus. Further, information obtained during this committee's investigation of the meth lab appears to show a culture of waste, fraud, abuse, and misconduct at NIST police services. For example, according to a recent Department of Commerce Office of Inspector General's report, the very officer who caused the explosion on NIST campus had committed time and attendance fraud by claiming many hours that he did not actually work. So how do we know that this is not happening throughout the police services group at NIST? These unfortunate examples undermine and jeopardize NIST's mission to promote U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness, which enhances economic security and improves our quality of life. This legislation is an important step forward to analyze the work of NIST Police Services Group and outside contractors to ensure that they are adequately securing both NIST campuses to protect NIST employees, contractors, visitors, and surrounding communities from any potential hazards. The legislation and a thorough review, evaluation, and report by the GAO will provide further recommendations and options to ensure a safe and secure NIST in the future. Again, I want to thank Chairman Loudermilk for his work on this subject and urge my colleagues to support the bill. The ranking member, Ms. Johnson, is recognized for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As we all know, the past year there have been two somewhat high-profile security incidences on NIST campuses. First, in July 2015, a NIST police officer caused a small explosion while he was attempting to make methamphetamine. That officer immediately resigned, was tried and convicted of a felony, and sent to prison. This year, a man with apparent mental health issues was found trespassing in this facility in Colorado. That man was found in a supposedly secure area. Again, that person was arrested by police and cited. These incidents raised legitimate concerns and prompted the NIST director to take several actions to address these concerns, including convening an ad hoc panel of security experts and beginning steps to better secure the Boulder campus. The incidences have also prompted the majority to investigate NIST. These investigations have yielded much useful information, haven't yielded much useful information, nor any evidence of systemic waste, fraud, or abuse at NIST. Perhaps as a result of that, this past April, Chairman Smith and Chairman Thune of the Senate Commerce Committee jointly requested a GAO study on NIST police and security issues. That is why it is so odd to see a very similar study requirement in this bill. Given that GAO will surely prioritize the Joint Chair's request, I don't really see the point in requiring this study through legislation. Moreover, the GAO study may be premature. The advice that the outside security experts provided to NIST have been digested, and the agency is currently implementing changes to address their findings. It might be more useful to review NIST security practices a year from now, rather than in the midst of significant changes. I also have some minor concerns about the rest of the bill. Part of the bill simply legislates something that NIST and the Department of Commerce are already doing. But the bill also micromanages staffing at the agency in a way that could be counterproductive to the purpose of the bill. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, and I'll now recognize the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Loudermilk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your support and help with what I think is a very important bill. As you noted in your opening statement, some highly unfortunate events have occurred at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or as I will refer to, NIST, during the past year. In addition to the meth lab incident at the NIST Gaithersburg campus, as well as the instances of time and attendance fraud, there was a recent alarming occurrence that took place at the NIST Boulder campus. In April, an individual with no identification, who was not a NIST employee, was found in a building on the campus. The incident required a summons to county firefighters because of the concerns that the individual may have been exposed to chlorine gas stored in the building's clean room. He was eventually transported to the local hospital, and the incident is currently part of an ongoing criminal investigation. There are a few reasons why this situation is so concerning to me. First, how does a non-NIST employee get on campus into a secure building and then into a room where potentially dangerous, hazardous, or poisonous chemicals may be present? Most importantly, how did this all take place without NIST police or security knowledge? And what is the extent of damage that that individual could have caused by having access to that building and room? For a federal agency that received a notice of violation by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission just 1 year ago for failing to keep records showing the receipt, inventory, including location and unique identity, acquisition, transfer, and disposal of all special nuclear material in its possession, this is extremely concerning. In the NRC's investigation, they discovered radioactive material and sources that were not included in NIST's inventory. While this raises additional accountability issues and concerns, it also emphasizes the need for adequate and effective security at NIST campuses. As a small business owner and former director of a nonprofit, I know how important accountability is to the success and future of an organization. It is inexcusable that an important government agency like NIST is lagging behind in accountability, especially when it comes to the security and the protection of campuses and its employees. This legislation is an important example of how congressional oversight works. Being able to check on and check the executive allows Congress to step in when an agency is lacking efficiency and effectiveness to ensure adequate measures are taken and taxpayer dollars are protected. This bill directs the Department of Commerce Office of Security to get involved in the law enforcement and security programs at NIST. In addition, it enlists the GAO to produce an analysis on the performance and efficiency of NIST security in its current state and to make recommendations on how to improve security on its campuses. I look forward to working with my colleagues to mark up this bill. It is important for us to take action to ensure accountability and effective security at one of our nation's oldest physical science laboratories. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Loudermilk, for your statement and also for all your work on the legislation. If there are no amendments, the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And thank you, Chair, for holding this hearing. And I have enjoyed working with the Chair this term. And I appreciate Mr. Loudermilk's bill because I believe that the principal role of elected leaders, the most paramount responsibility we have is the safety of the public. And Mr. Loudermilk, you have identified incidents at a NIST campus, and you have brought forward legislation to address those, and I commend you for doing that, and I want to support this. But I also believe that inexcusable would be for us to not do anything about other incidents involving public safety, specifically to gun violence. And in Georgia particularly, in April 2016, in Appling, Georgia, there was a mass shooting where 5 people were killed. On the same day as the San Bernardino event, 4 people were shot and 1 person was killed. And so I hope, Mr. Loudermilk, I would love to work with you in a bipartisan way to study the effects of gun violence and see what we can do through the Science Committee. And I would yield to you to see if you would entertain a way that we could work to uphold that responsibility of addressing and providing safety to the public.
Thank you for the commentary. Public safety is our concern. And I would reserve my comments to the bill that we have at hand. We can talk offline as far as other actions that need to take place. But I believe that this bill is important. I believe that it is our job to have strict oversight over our agencies. And when we see this type of action going on within an agency that just tends to disregard its responsibility, its accountability, I think it is, as you have stated, it is our responsibility to move forward. And I appreciate your kind comments on this bill.
Thank you. I'm reclaiming my time. Chair, I hope Mr. Loudermilk and I will report back with something we can do about the ban on research on gun violence.
Thank you, Mr. Walwell. I'm not sure that's our jurisdiction, but that was a nice try. But is there any other comments on this legislation? And if not, a reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 5636, the National Institute of Standards and Technology Campus Security Act, to the House with the recommendation that it be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5636 to the House as amended. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and H.R. 5636 is ordered reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. H.R. 5636 is ordered reported to the House. If there's no further discussion, that completes our business and concludes the markup. Without objection, we stand adjourned, but I do want to thank all the members for their presence today. This is a really good turnout. I can't promise that all markups will only be 42 minutes, but I do appreciate everybody's being here today and participating. We stand adjourned.